Good morning, students. I hope I'm audible and also the screen is visible.
Yes, sir.
Shall we start? Okay, we'll start. So today we are going to discuss a topic, sedentary lifestyle. So the importance of this topic is that in today's world, this is a problem or a common issue among all the age groups. So I'm Dr. Evan Roy, Senior Resident, Molecular Physiology. So physical learning objectives by the end of this lecture, you should have an idea about the sedentary lifestyle, the factors that lead to sedentary lifestyle, the risk factors, the definition, briefly on metabolic syndrome, and the recommendations and the benefits of physical activity. So, as we know, patterns of the physical activity they are undergoing significant changes in the recent years among all the age groups. And the literature suggests that they are mostly influenced by factors such as change of lifestyle, gender differences, economic status of the individual, social culture influences, the educational levels, and the occupational factors, and also other determinants. And many workers in this children and young adults and adults across different societies, mainly India. I hope I'm audible. Hello, am I audible? Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
So the reason for sedentary lifestyle is an increased engagement with virtual games, cell phones, television, social media, spending more time on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and some of our most important contributing factors among you. And also the increased of transportation and the reduced involvement in the outdoor activities also contribute to this outcome. So in a study conducted by the Indian Council of Medical Research, the physical activity patterns in adults across India were studied, and it reported that among 14,227 individuals, almost more than 50%, that is 54.4%, were inactive, while 31% were active and 13.7% were highly active. And this trend is a matter of concern as the percentage of inactive population appears to be very significant. Studies also have suggested that university students are going down in their physical activity compared to the recommended levels, and it can be identified that this physical inactivity is the fourth leading risk factor for global mortality. So here in this picture, you can see the person playing a video game, person watching television, person using computer, and person reading the book. These are examples of sedentary activity or sedentary lifestyle. The thing is, anything in excess is harmful. So the pictures depicted here shows a prolonged period of time, a duration more than 2 hours or 3 hours in the same position. So what are the ill effects of inactive lifestyle? If you're inactive, you burn few calories. So obviously you gain weight. Then there is loss of your muscle mass and your strength and your endurance. As you are not activating muscles enough, your bones get weaker and you lose your cholesterol and mineral content, and your immune system will function less. That means that you'll be more prone to infections, and any small or food will be prone to. Then you have a poorer blood circulation, which means that there's a chance as the blood gets to will stagnate and there's no improved blood circulation. And the body has a more inflammatory or a highly inflammatory condition, that is, the body will be in a state of be highly inflamed or susceptible to sudden inflammations. Well, obviously, you have your hormone imbalances. This can lead to delay in puberty, delay in puberty as well. In 2011, a comparative of the ratio of work metabolic rate to the standard resting metabolic rate of 1 kilocalorie, that is kilogram per hour. So 1 minute is the resting metabolic rate of all the energy cost for a person at rest. So when a person is at rest, we can calculate it as 1 minute. And when it is classified quantitatively, it can be classified as sedentary behavior is classified as between range between 1 to 1.5. The light intensity or light activity can be between 1.6 to 2.9. Moderate intensity between 3 and 5.9. And if your vigorous activity or vigorous intensity is greater or equal to 6 minutes. So you calculate the sedentary lifestyle based on your METs. So this is a study done by Rambale. So yeah, this is study done by Rambale et al. So some important sedentary means a distinct class of behavior, that is sitting, watching TV or driving, characterized with little physical movement and no energy expenditure, that is less than or equal to 1.5 minutes. Sedentarism is an extended engagement behavior and that rest. And what do you mean by physically active? That is, it means the guidelines physical activity, and it's reflected in achieving a threshold number of minute to moderate vigorous activity per day. And physical inactivity is it's the absence of physical activity. It's usually reflected as the proportion of time we are not engaged in any activity of some predetermined intensity. That is, you are not at all being active and you are not at all meeting the criteria for the METS criteria. So this is activity is defined by WHO as any body movement produced by skeletal muscles that need energy expenditure, including activities undertaken can be while working, while playing, while completing household chores, traveling, and engaging in recreational pursuits. So any bodily movement that obviously requires an energy expenditure. And almost the risk of this is almost 2 million deaths every year is attributed to physical inactivity. And WHO study states that there are certain risk factors. The risk factors that lead to sedentary lifestyle is one of the 10 leading causes of death and disability in the world. So as you see in this picture, you can see the number of steps. So there are certain lot of studies done, and what they came to the conclusion that anything less than 5 steps per day means that person is living a sedentary lifestyle. That is, and due to lack of movement, any accumulated time in sedentary behavior. People with sedentary lifestyle, they tend to spend time more in one place. It can be either using the computer, there can be either let's say watching a movie or doing some other work, but sitting in a same place, and they tend to walk less than 5,000 steps per day. A low activity lifestyle means between 5,000 to 7,499, almost 8,000 steps per day. But this is not meeting the MBPA recommendation. That is, there is a recommendation for a moderate physical activity, which suggests that any activity greater than or equal to 7,500 steps per day is ideal to lead a physically active lifestyle. The norm nowadays, or the trend nowadays we follow is 10,000 steps per day. That is almost 5 miles per day. You're supposed to walk almost 5 miles per day. So this is a graph which shows from low activity to the average and the energy expenditure, and the low energy expenditure to the high energy expenditure. And this, the topmost portion is to be physically active. That is greater than 7,500 steps per day. The usual recommended recommendation. This is a certain example of moderate vigorous physical activity. There is riding a bicycle and running. So, what are the risk factors for your? What are the risk factors for your in sedentary lifestyle? That is, if you are leading a sedentary lifestyle, you'll be prone to all these conditions here put up on the screen. That is, you'll be prone to heart disease, hypertension, stroke, congestive cardiac failure, atherosclerosis, deep vein thrombosis. Yeah, deep vein thrombosis, let's catch here because usually seen in people who are standing for a long time. And recent studies have shown that we've seen people who have been sitting also for a longer time because uh, anyway the gravity will be acting and the blood will be pouring in the lower limbs. And you have a lot, your each organ system will be affected. With its digestive system, you will have non-alcoholic fatty liver. So this is a common problem seen in middle-age, non-alcoholic, certain cancers that can go to colorectal cancers, ovarian cancers, breast cancer, and then cancer, etc. Then your immunity, you will be prone to develop rheumatoid arthritis, your osteoporosis. That is, your bones will be brittle because you are not putting effort on the bones to tolerate a certain kind of activity. The bones will be brittle and be prone to osteoporosis, and you have a tendency to develop diabetes, that is insulin resistance, obesity, and metabolic syndrome. We will talk briefly on metabolic syndrome, and also misuse atrophy. From right, there is Darwin's theory of use and misuse of an organ. So if you don't use a portion, your muscles during the long run, the muscle will start to atrophy. That is one of the reasons in old age people will have this. If you don't maintain your body or if you don't do any exercise, your muscles will start to lose the mass and it will disease atrophy. And also psychological issues like if you do not exercise, if you remain inactive or sedentary, you will be prone to more depression, anxiety, and cognitive function. Your sleep also will be disturbed. You won't be able to get a proper sleep, and you'll be predisposed to all this cancers and especially hormone imbalance like PCOS. So this is a common condition seen among women from the age of say 17 years to 30 years. So this also can result from physical inactivity. So you may ask me a question like, what about people with family history of diabetes or hypertension or atherosclerosis or heart disease, etc.? Yes, family history is a risk factor, but as long as you are physically active, you can probably delay the onset of your family history or the familial diseases. You can always, as long as you're physically active, you can delay up to an extent. For example, if the father had hypertension at the age of say 35, you'll be prone to the children will be prone to have hypertension by 30 to 35 years. But if you are physically active, you take all the precautions, you may be able to prolong it for long. Then maybe you will be able by 45 or 50 or 55. So it depends on there is always prevention has a greater role is among all these risk factors. So metabolic syndrome is also called as syndrome X, and also another terminology is insulin resistance syndrome. They are the constellation of this metabolic abnormalities that increase the risk of cardiovascular disease and diabetes mellitus. Main features are central obesity. So you can see people, especially our Indian population or Asian population, who were active in their maybe early childhood and teens, but by the time they reach middle age, they tend to put on fat, especially towards the central of the abdomen. So this central obesity is basically more of your visceral fat, subcutaneous fat, then visceral as well as the subcutaneous fat. Then you have hypertriglyceridemia. Hypercholesterolemia, you can see that the triglyceride levels of these patients will be elevated, and you have low HDL cholesterol. See, HDL cholesterol is an indicator of how active you are. It's also called as a good cholesterol. So the more if you're a physically active person, even if you're overweight but you're physically active, your HDL cholesterol should be good, and this is a protective factor for the heart. HDL cholesterol, but in people with metabolic syndrome, their HDL cholesterol will be low, and hyperglycemia, obviously elevated sugar levels, and hypertension. So this is the you can say that the combination of these factors cause your metabolic syndrome, especially your central obesity, hyperglycemia, triglyceridemia, hyperglycemia, and your hypertension. So what are the risk factors? One is overweight or obesity. So according to Asian standards, if you look at the BMI, body mass index, between 18.5 to 22 is the normal weight. Anything less than 18.5 is underweight. Within 18.5 to 22.9 is normal weight. From 23 onwards, that is 23 to 25 is classified as overweight, and more than 25 is classified as obese. But if you take the American scenario of the US recommendations, they say what for their population, they say that anything above 27 is overweight, whereas in our scenario, anything above 23 BMI, body mass index of 23, more than 23, we classify overweight. That is mainly because of our dietary patterns. Because our diets definitely consist of more of carbohydrates and less of protein, less of fat. So that is the reason why we are more prone, or our food habits also have a role to play in a sedentary lifestyle. Sedentary lifestyle is another risk factor. Aging more than 50 years, because after the age of 50, you tend to decline on your physical activities. Diabetes mellitus, so almost 75% of the population with diabetes mellitus have this metabolic syndrome, and coronary heart disease. 50% people suffering from coronary heart disease, 50% of metabolic syndrome. And what are the recommendations of WHO for the adults between the age of 18 to 64? They suggest that at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity physical activity throughout the week, and or at least 75 minutes of vigorous intensity physical activity throughout the week, or you can have a combination of both. What do you mean by moderate intensity physical activity? Moderate intensity means example include your walking, your brisk walking, you can say jogging, then then you're skipping, etc. Then what about vigorous activity? Vigorous activity includes you're running, you're cycling, going to gym, lifting heavy weight, etc. Those are vigorous activity. And for further health benefits, they suggest that your this moderate intensity should be increased by 300 per minutes with muscle training or weight training. The recommendation is every 2 weeks you're supposed to lift weights. And obviously, see, before starting any training program, if you're leading a sedentary lifestyle, immediately you cannot attain a goal. You have to always start slowly. Slowly, you have to build up on your endurance and your stamina. So these are the suggestions and physical activity recommendations for different age groups. You see, preschool children, if you make a comparison from probably 10 years or 20 years down the line and the current scenario, all of the our population, all age groups, especially the children and the adult, the physical activity score has decreased. There is also a lot of influence by the diet they take. There is a lot of junk food have been come into prevalence. There are a lot of similar activities like a lot of surfing in the internet, the use of social media, etc., taking away the time the students are supposed to be active. This is seen most commonly in the college students. Okay, coming on to the recommendation, different age groups, they are supposed to be active throughout the day, and uh, and they have to engage in different types of physical activity. It's not like they should engage in what you say, a particular exercise regime. Let them, it's the age they have to play and they should be physically active. Then children and adults between 6 to 17 years, they recommend 1 hour of moderate to vigorous intensity. And and as a part of this, at least 3 days a week, they need uh, vigorous activity like running or soccer, activities that strengthen the muscles like climbing or push-ups, and activities. These are the recommendations which are coming seminars. The same CDC guidelines contemplate intensity activities such as brisk walking, at least 2 days a week of activities that strengthen the muscle. That's your weight training. 2 days. So 150 minutes a week means 30 or 20 minutes for 25 minutes for 6 days a week, or 30 minutes for at least 5 days a week. You have to do some form of exercise. Older years, the same, and they improve their balance. Because as to prevent all this, you have to be physically active. So why do we recommend to people to be physically active? So what is the reason? It's a clear cut, because we have health benefits of being physically active as adults. What are the immediate benefits? Immediate benefits is that you'll be able to sleep properly. You have a better improved quality of sleep. Then you will be less anxious, because as soon as you exercise, within few hours your endorphins are released. So they give you a sensation of calmness and coolness, and your blood pressure also will be reduced and it will be under control. And the long-term benefits is, if you're a regular person who's physically active, so you will improve your brain health. That means you'll be able to concentrate more on your studies or any activity you're including, and it can slow or negatively prevent the development of dementia condition like Alzheimer's disease, and reduce the risk of depression. It is highly unlikely that you'll be depressed. When your heart health, it will improve your risk of developing heart disease, or if at all you have any heart ailment, it will keep those conditions under control and prevent you from stroke as well as your diabetes. Cancer prevention. It can uh, definitely reduce the amount of cancers like commonly breast cancer, colon cancer, your stomach cancer, etc. So it can uh, rather prevent your cancer development. And if you maintain a healthy weight, the long-term benefit of physical activity, if you're physically active for a particular amount of period during the day, and if you take the adequate amount of calories, that is, the calories should not be less, calories should not be more, because the more calories you take, the more you have to burn out those calories. So if you take a calorie according to your requirement, your body requirement, according to your activity requirement, you'll be able to maintain a healthy weight. And if you are overweight or obese, you need to put a little more effort. Suppose you have recommendation is 2% calories per day, and if you are still overweight, then you may have to take maybe a calorie restricted diet with more physical activity. For example, 1,800 calories per day, and you have more energy needs to be expended, and you have improved strength in your bones. You'll be able to do your activities effortlessly, and you'll be able to improve your balance and coordination. So the recent studies have shown that the trend of physical inactivity among medical students, and also IT professionals, amongst professionals. So it's very important to adopt the importance of adopting a healthy for us people in the medical field. We need to advise others when people come to us in the outpatient department. The person is overweight or obese. First, we need ourselves to be physically fit, so that the patient will listen to our suggestions and our advice. So we should have a healthy body. So as you know, famously, sound mind will have a sound body. Not a sound body will have a sound mind. So you should be physically fit so as to suggest or advise the patient when ready to listen to you. And even though student behavior is considered a temporary part of college life, unhealthy behavior at this level can persist at a level. Here, student behavior, what is meant by student behavior here in this scenario is your stress. Definitely a lot of stress. Nowadays is a time for due to this COVID situation. We are all sitting in a place. We all are attending online classes from morning, from you can say dawn to dusk. We are just sitting in a place listening to online classes. Less of physical activity and lot of stress. You have to complete your assignments on time. You have to prepare for the exam, and you have other stresses as well. And this will lead to unhealthy behavior. Unhealthy behavior is one, being sedentary, taking a lot of stress. Second, having junk foods, which are difficult to digest, less fiber content. So all this add to the behavior of the student, and there has been trend that people they carry it towards their adult life as well. And not only that, another unhealthy behavior include the vices like smoking, drinking alcohol, and use of drugs. So all this will affect the student in a way that they won't be able to concentrate in their studies, and they won't be able to focus more on their day-to-day routine activities. And this will be a trend, and this will be carried on towards the adulthood. So the need to encourage physical activity and healthy dietary habits in medical colleges is important, because as budding physicians, we are supposed to be role models to the people and patients in and around us, especially our relatives. Whenever they ask us, we basically advise them. So, example, and to be physically active is a norm. Here in Alapura, it's a plus point. After your college hours, you will get time to play physical activities. That's a good thing. And I don't know in how many other colleges this is part of the curriculum. In school, if you in school time, you will have this PT period or games period. So, and nowadays they are trying to make this sports an important aspect because, like I said, 10 years, 20 years before, the situation was completely different. There was not much of social media, and a lot of time was spent in playing games and more of outdoor activities. Nowadays, it's more of indoor activities. Yes, we need cognitive games, indoor games like chess and caroms, etc. But more than that, we need to be physically active because and certain studies, recent studies have shown that the buildup of atherosclerotic plaques, throughout your childhood. Suppose you are overweight or obese in your childhood, and you continue the trend towards the same at your adulthood, then even if you lose weight, maybe the remnants of the fat accumulation among the years can still be there in your vessels, or you'll be still have a tendency to put on weight. That is, people who are overweight, obese, or reduced weight, who have come to a main normal body weight, is a good thing. But there is a tendency that they can fall back to the same overweight criteria or this criteria. So you should be very careful. So what's your move? Why should you? What is the need that physically active? It improves your mood. It sharpens your focus. It reduces the stress and improves your sleep. And mind you, there's another important thing regarding physical activity and sleep is that try to be physically active at least 6 hours before you sleep and before your regular sleeping time, and at least try to take caffeine 6 to 8 hours before your sleeping period. People will be coffee addicts or tea addicts, more coffee addicts, but this coffee then try to take it before maybe 6 p.m. or 5 p.m. Or you can do adjust according to the concentration of caffeine you are using. Because all this will affect your sleep. And physically, if you are physically active for around 3 to 4 hours, endorphins will be released and you will be highly, what to say, your body will be the high energy state post exercise. So, and to set for all these things to settle, take around 4 to 6 hours. So, time physical activity. And people ask regarding leave. That ideally depends on individual to individual. People, there are certain early morning people who get up early in the morning, so they can utilize the time in the early morning. People who come after work, who relax for some time and then engage busy life. So make sure you are always you should be fresh before an activity. That is either you get up early morning, you will fresh and then you will exercise, or even you come back, you rest for some time and then you go busy life. Because always you should be physically, you should be alert and mentally also, and physically you should be not tired enough before an activity, because with tiredness you will never be able to perform in a sport or a game well. So always make sure you take adequate rest between your workouts and meal planning. Have a proper nutrition diet. More of you should have a balanced diet. Carbohydrates, proteins, and fat should be part of the diet. Fat should be less. Proteins and carbohydrates, almost usually people say carbohydrates should be 60%, protein 13, and fat 10. But you can adjust it. You can make carbohydrates into 50 and protein 40 like that. So yeah, and as you know, carbohydrates they empty the stomach immediately. Protein foods will take some other time. Carbohydrates empty the stomach from 4 hours. Proteins will take 6 hours, and fat almost 8 hours. So accordingly, you can have your meals. Now, how much activity recommendation is at least 150 minutes per week, and uh, among this 150 minutes, that is 5 days or 6 days in a week, you are supposed to do 2 days of weight training. And see, we all need to start doing. People, I know most of you are active. The people who are inactive, you have to start. There's always a starting trouble. Once you get moving, then it will be easy. So once any activity, it's not necessary that you have to run, you have to jog, you have to go to gym, etc. Any activity, like if you are home, you can clean the house. You can clean the house. If you have a car, you can clean the car. This all comes under light to mild moderate activity. You can walk. You can take if you have a lift and if you have the stairs. Always take the stairs. If you park your car somewhere, don't try to park it close to your destination. Park it somewhere else, obviously the safe place, so that you will be able to walk in the car. So these are the yeah, and try to every half an hour, every 40 minutes, try to get up from your places and move around. At least for 5 minutes, just get up. If you are in a same sitting position, don't try to crouch. Try to stretch every 30 minutes. Get up from your seats, stretch out your hands and legs, etc. So try to be physically active. You can practice. So you can engage in different sports, games. Yoga also is there, but for yoga you have to meet a practitioner, people who know how to do it in the right way. Because anything practiced, whatever form of exercise you do, whatever sports you engage, make sure you engage in the proper way, a proper form. And this physical activity will lower your risk of all the lower the risk of especially metabolic syndrome. So sedentary lifestyle can lead to all this condition. So beware, be physically active, and advise. You can advise your family members, maybe your people whom you know, your parents or relatives. If you feel that they're physically inactive, especially after retirement, previously the norm was after retirement there's nothing to do, and they will be sitting most of the time. They will be physical activity. But now this sedentary lifestyle, this problem is seen among all the population. You begin from childhood, from school age itself, or from preschool itself. You see the children. If you know anyone about giving the children gadgets like the mobile phone, right, tell them to refrain from it. You should always have a control of screen time. And yes, classes are unavoidable. Your classes, your online classes, but try to find time to do physically active. So that will always be physically active. Will help you in all your other field, all other areas of all other areas like your studies. They keep your stress, your anxiety, because student life is a very stressful period. So to circum that stress, many students, they depend on alcohol or smoking. They try to start such things like alcohol, smoking, and even drugs. But all this will have a deleterious effect. Even though if you know people who are indulging, always try to advise them, try to restrain them on. If you are also into this, or if you have an interest, if you have to try out, means don't ever do all these things, because this will in turn destroy you in the long run. So always be physically active, and it's a good thing that you guys are physically active. Just continue that trend, even if however busy you are after your MBBS also. Even if you are going forward, try to get time, half an hour, because everyone has 24 hours and it depends on how you utilize your time efficiently. So as Edward Stanley said, it's rightly said that for those who don't make time for exercise, they will have to make time for fitness. That is, people who are giving excuses of, I don't want to be physically active, I don't want to do exercise, I don't want to play games, rather I would like to sit somewhere or watch movie or watch any web series or etc. But in the long run, when you start to have this metabolic diseases like hypertension or diabetes, etc., you have to make time for doing your checkups and spend money also. And it is a bit costly. It's not everything comes cheap. You have to spend more. Yes, there are certain. It's a fact that there are certain things which are inevitable in life. You cannot avoid certain circumstances, but you have always had, you have got always an option to prevent certain things to happen. So yeah, with that I end my class. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And a small, yeah, and a small assignment that is also. So in the comment box, you can just put on, like, the people who are attending this class. I hope you've given your attendance. If not, you can put on just one sport activity that you are interested in. So this is for the people in YouTube live also. They can in the comment section, if they're allowed to, then they can, as a form of an assignment. This is just strictly for your attendance. So just to make sure that you've gone through the slides. So just a physical activity or a sports which you are interested in. Just put that in the YouTube. Okay, thank you. Once you've given your sports, you can exit. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.
Morning, dear students. Good morning.
Morning.
Yes. So today we will be dealing with regulation of gene expression. Regulation of gene expression. Regulation of gene expression can be asked as a short note for it. Yes. So you all know synthesis of protein is under the influence of G. See, synthesis of protein is under the influence of G. Is under the influence of gene, and this is referred as gene expression. Understand? So what is gene expression? Synthesis of protein under the influence of gene is referred as gene expression. And organisms adapt to environmental insult by altering the gene expression. Understand? Organism will adapt to environmental insult by and how this is done, how it is being altered. This is by binding specific proteins. This is by binding specific broadly, gene expression is of two types. That is positive regulation and negative regulation. Positive regulation. Sorry for the inconvenience. So there are two types of regulation, positive regulation and negative regulation. In positive regulation, what happens is that the gene expression is quantitatively increased in presence of a regulator. And that regulator, which causes increased expression, is referred as activator or inducer. Those causes positive regulation are referred as activators or inducers. Understand? Activators or inducers. Whereas when the expression of gene information is diminished by the presence of a regulator, it is referred as negative regulation. Understand? And the regulator is termed repressor. Understand? The regulator which causes negative S. So the regulator which causes negative expression is referred as repressors, and those which quantitatively increase gene expression are referred as activators or inducers. Understand? So there are three types of responses to regulatory signal. There are three types of responses to regulatory signals. They include type A response. What do you mean by type A response? Say, in presence of a signal. Say, let this be the signal. So, the gene expression is quantitatively increased. Understand? It is being increased in presence of the signal. There is a constant increase in the expression. That is type A response. In presence of the signal, you can see there is an increase in the expression of G. That is type A response. What do you mean by type B response? In type B response, there is an increased rate of gene expression, and that is transient, even in the continued presence of regulatory signal. Even in the presence of continued, even in the presence of the continued presence of regulatory signal, the gene expression is transient. The gene expression is transient. Gene expression is transient. That is type B response. That is type B response. So even when there is a signal, the expression is transient. So this is the gene expression. The y-axis, it is represented as the gene expression is represented in the y-axis. See, we can see the signal. This is the signal. Even in the presence of signal, it is transient. That is type B response. Now, what is type? Is cut off, the regulation is being, gene regulation is being indefinitely being extended. Understand, the gene expression is indefinitely being extended even when the signal is cut off. See, here we can see the signal is up to this much only, but the gene expression is being continued. So that is type C responses. So there are three types of responses for gene regulation. In type A response, we can see In presence of the signal, you can see the gene expression is being increased. Whereas in type B response, even though the signal is there, it is transient. The gene expression is transient. Whereas in type C response, the signal has been cut off, but the gene expression is indefinitely being continued. Understand? These are the three types of responses. So that is a bit on the introduction of gene regulation. Now we are moving on to the gene regulation in prokaryotes. Gene regulation in prokaryotes. Prokaryotic gene regulation. What do you mean by cistron? Yes. Roll number 89, Hiba. What do you mean by cistron?
Ma'am, part of RNA that codes for a protein.
Yes, it is a basic unit of gene expression. So what is cistron? Cistron is a basic unit of gene expression. Understand? It is a basic unit of gene expression. It's a basic unit of gene expression. That is, it is a sequence of DNA. It is a sequence of DNA that code for a single subunit of protein. It is a sequence of DNA. Let this be the sequence of DNA that encode for a single subunit of protein. So this is the cistron. Understand? A single subunit of DNA is it's a sequence of DNA which code for a single subunit of protein. Is referred as cistron. In prokaryote, the expression is polycistronic. The expression is, the gene expression is polycistronic. What do you mean by polycistronic? That means a single mRNA can encode more than one separately translated protein. A single mRNA can encode more than one separately translate. Let this be the mRNA. It can encode more than one protein. Understand? Let this be one protein. This is another protein. A single mRNA can encode more than one separately translated protein. And this is referred as polycistronic. In eukaryotic, the expression is monocistronic. Understand? In prokaryote, it is polycistronic. Yes. So that is about cistron. So cistron is a basic unit of gene expression. So the DNA sequence that is involved in the synthesis of a protein is referred as cistron. And in prokaryote, the gene expression is polycistronic. That means a single mRNA, a single large mRNA can encode more than one separately translated protein. Understand? That is polycistronic. In eukaryote, it is monocistronic. Understand? So during metabolism, in prokaryotes, the genes that are involved in metabolic pathway are arranged in a linear array. They are arranged in a linear array. So the genes that are involved in metabolism are being arrayed. For example, in heme synthesis, the enzymes that are involved in heme synthesis are being arranged in a single array, and this is referred as operon. So the linear array of gene involved in metabolism is called an operon. And this operon hypothesis was being deciphered or being discovered by the scientist Jacob Monod. Was described by Jacob Monod in the year 1961. And this hypothesis was based on observation of gene regulation of lactose metabolism in intestinal bacteria E. coli. In intestinal bacteria E. coli. Lactose metabolism. And for this, he was awarded Nobel Prize. Jacob Monod, the operon hypothesis. So today we'll discuss the regulation of gene expression based on lactose metabolism. So the genes that are involved in lactose metabolism include the structural genes. The structural genes, which are the structural genes, LAC, Z, LAC Y, and LAC A. LAC Z will code for beta galactosidase. LAC Z code for beta galactosidase. And LAC Y codes for permease. And LAC A codes for thiogalactoside transacetylase. Thiogalactoside transacetylase. So these are the three enzymes that are needed for lactose metabolism. So the genes that are involved in the operon are the structural genes. Then comes the LAC operator. LAC operator, it is located upstream LAC Z. Understand? Then comes LAC promoter. So these are the genes that are needed for lactose metabolism, LAC promoters. LAC promoters where the RNAP binds. It is at this region where the RNAP binds. LAC promoter, then comes LAC I, or which is responsible for the synthesis of repressor molecules. Understand? So these are the genes that are needed for lactose metabolism. These are the structural genes: LAC operator, LAC promoters, and LAC repressor. And they are being arranged in a linear array. They are being arranged in a linear array. And that is the operon. Understand? So here comes, let this be the structural genes. LAC Z. And LAC A. Here comes LAC Y. Here it is LAC A. Then upstream LAC Z is a operator locus. Is a operator locus. Operator locus, and upstream lies a promoter, and this is a LAC I. So these are the genes that are involved in lactose metabolism. So this genetic arrangement of the structural gene and the regulatory gene allows for the coordinate expression of the three enzymes that are needed for lactose metabolism. Understand? Each of the linked gene is transcribed into one large mRNA. Each of these linked gene is being transcribed into one large mRNA. Understand? And they undergo translation, resulting in the synthesis of, so LAC Z, we can see beta galactoside is being synthesized, beta galactoside. And LAC Y will encode permease enzyme. Synthesizes the encodes for the permease, and LAC A for thiogalactoside transacetylase. Understand? For this mRNA, there are multiple independent start site as well as the stop codon. Then only they can synthesize separate proteins. Understand? This explains the polycistronic expression of gene in prokaryotes. So now coming to the regulation, mainly we will discuss the regulation under 3 headings. Regulation of gene expression in prokaryotes under 3 headings, that are repression, de-repression, and fine regulation. Fine regulation. Repression, de-repression, and fine regulation. See, this can be asked as a 5 marks question for 5 marks in like 8 mark in 4 mark in questions. So it can be asked as a 4 mark question for it. I think during your +2 classes you have studied. You are thorough with this. I think. Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So what is repression? What do you mean by repression? Now coming to repression. See, transcription is normally repressed. Transcription is normally repressed. See, expression of this LAC-I, expression of LAC-I will encode for repressor molecules. Expression of LAC-I will encode repressor molecules. This repressor, there will be 4 subunits of LAC repressor molecules, and each having a molecular weight of 38,000. Each subunit has got a molecular weight of 38,000. So this LAC-I will encode for the synthesis of repressor molecules. And this repressor molecules has got high affinity towards operator locus. Understand? This repressor molecules has got high affinity towards the operator locus. So what happens when RNAP binds at this promoter region? It can't move forward. It can't move forward. So it can't synthesize the enzymes needed for lactose metabolism. Understand? So when repressor molecule bind to the operator locus, the RNAP enzyme can't move forward, and so it can't synthesize the enzymes needed for lactose metabolism. And thus it prevents the transcription of operator locus as well as the structural genes LAC-Z, LAC-Y, and LAC-A. Understand? Thus, LAC-I repressor molecule is acting as a negative regulator. So, when lactose is not available, lactose utilizing enzymes are not being synthesized. That is a repression. Understand? So transcription is normally repressed. Only when lactose is there, it is de-repressed. Understand? So this theory was based on the observation that this theory was based on the observation of lactose metabolism in E. coli. When cells are grown in a glucose media, it do not contain beta-galactosidase enzyme. But when it is being transported to a media containing lactose, beta-galactosidase level increases. And thus it has been found that the lactose metabolism in the absence of, when the lactose is not there in the media, the transcription is repressed. Transcription is normally repressed. Only when lactose is there, it is de-repressed. So that is about repression. Understand? So what is repression? As when normally transcription is repressed. How? The LAC-I will synthesize, encode for the repressor molecule. It helps in the synthesis of the repressor molecules, and this repressor molecule will bind to the operator locus, inhibiting the movement of RNAP forward to synthesize the enzymes needed for lactose metabolism. Now, what happens when lactose is introduced into the media? When lactose is introduced into the media, that is de-repression. What happens? We will see in presence of lactose metabolism. So when lactose is there in the media, let this be the lactose molecules. When lactose is there in the media, this lactose will come and bind to the repressor molecules. Lactose will come and bind to the repressor molecules. And it will inhibit the binding of this complex to the operator locus. When lactose is there in the media, lactose will bind to the repressor molecule and inhibit the binding of the repressor molecule to the operator locus. Thus, RNAP can't move forward. Thus, RNAP can move forward. No, since the repressor doesn't bind to the operator locus, the RNAP will move forward and help in the synthesis of the enzymes needed. So the mRNA is being, there is transcription occurring, and this transcription, after transcription, translation for the corresponding proteins. So the corresponding proteins are being synthesized, such as the enzymes beta-galactosidase, then permease and transacylase are being synthesized. So here the lactose is acting as an inducer. Lactose is acting as an inducer. So when lactose is there in the media, lactose will bind to the repressor molecule and will inhibit the binding of the complex to the operator locus. So what happens? RNAP can move forward and help in the synthesis of the enzymes needed for lactose metabolism. So that is de-repression. Understand? So what is fine regulation? Fine regulation of lac operon. Fine regulation of lac operon. It has been found that, say, when the culture media contain both glucose and lactose, when the culture media, when it contains both glucose and lactose, the bacteria will preferentially utilize glucose first. Only after glucose has been utilized, the lactose synthesizing enzymes are being expressed. Understand? So when both glucose and lactose is there in the media, only when glucose is exhausted, lactose is metabolized. Only when glucose is exhausted, lactose is metabolized. And this has been found that a catabolite activator protein is involved in lactose metabolism. A catabolite activator protein is involved in lactose metabolism. So when the cell is starved of glucose, what happens is that the catabolite activator protein, can bind to cyclic AMP. And this will help in the binding of RNAP to the promoter locus. Understand? When the cell is starved of glucose, cyclic AMP, adenylate cyclase enzyme level increases, which will activate cyclic AMP synthesis. And when the cyclic AMP level increases, the cyclic AMP will bind to catabolite activator protein. And this catabolite activator protein complex with cyclic AMP, which will help in binding of RNAP strongly to the promoter locus and help in the synthesis of the enzymes needed for lactose metabolism. Understand? That is the fine regulation of lac operon. Understand? So we discussed the lactose metabolism, the regulation of lactose metabolism under 3 headings, which are they? Repression, de-repression, and fine regulation. What do you mean by repression? That's what do you mean by repression? Normally, transcription is repressed. Normally, transcription is repressed. When lactose is not there in the media, lactose metabolism won't occur. There is no need for the lactose synthesizing enzyme. So the inducer LAC-I will synthesizes repressor molecule. LAC-I will synthesizes repressor molecule, and this repressor molecule will bind to the operator locus and inhibit the synthesis of the enzymes needed for lactose metabolism. When lactose is there in the media, what happens? When lactose is there in the media, it acts as an inducer. It will bind to the repressor molecule and inhibit the binding of repressor molecule to the operator locus. So the RNAP can move forward and synthesize the enzymes needed for lactose metabolism. Now, what do you mean by fine regulation? When both glucose and lactose are there in the media, only after utilizing glucose, the enzymes needed for lactose metabolism are being synthesized. It has been explained that a catabolite activated protein is being, when the cell is starved of glucose, a catabolite activated protein is being synthesized. And this catabolite activated protein will form a complex with cyclic AMP. When glucose is not there in the media, adenylate cyclase enzyme level increases, which helps in the synthesis of more cyclic AMP. And this cyclic AMP will form a complex with catabolite activated protein. And so this will promote the binding of RNAP to the promoter locus and help in the synthesis of the enzymes needed for lactose metabolism. So when lac operon is as a short note for you, you have to discuss the regulation under these headings: repression, de-repression, and fine regulation. Understand? Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Now coming to regulation of heme synthesis. A word about regulation of heme synthesis, which is a rate limiting enzyme in heme synthesis. Yes, which is a rate limiting enzyme in heme synthesis. കഴിഞ്ഞതാണല്ലോ heme synthesis ഒക്കെ. Yes. Yes. ALA synthesis. Regulation, heme synthesis and regulation important ആണ്. ഏതിന്റെ after metabolism, you have to know about the regulation as well as the energetics ആണ്. 3 കാര്യങ്ങൾ നിങ്ങൾ ഓർക്കുക. സ്റ്റെപ്സ് പറയുക, റെഗുലേഷൻ പറയുക, എനർജറ്റിക്സ് പറയുക. ഏത് മെറ്റബോളിസം പറഞ്ഞാൽ whenever you study ഈ 3 ഒരുമിച്ച് പഠിക്കുക. റെഗുലേഷൻ, സ്റ്റെപ്സ്, റെഗുലേഷൻ ആൻഡ് എനർജറ്റിക്സ്. So see, the key enzyme in heme synthesis is ALA synthase. We'll see how it is being repressed. So ALA synthase is involved in, let this be the structural gene for the synthesis of ALA synthase. ALA synthase enzyme. It synthesizes, it helps in the synthesis of heme. Let this be the regulator region. And this is the promoter, LAC-I or repressor. Then this is the operator lock. So the inducer will help in the synthesis of aporepressor molecule. Will help in the synthesis of aporepressor molecule. And heme is acting as a co-repressor. Heme here, it is acting as a co-repressor. So when enough heme is there in our body, what happens? This heme will combine with the aporepressor, forming a holorepressor. It will combine with, let this be the heme. So it will bind to the aporepressor, forming holorepressor, holorepressor, and this will bind to the operator, and this will bind to the operator locus. So what happens? The RNAP can't move forward. RNAP can't move forward to synthesize the enzymes needed for heme synthesis. Understand? So when enough heme is there, in the media, what happens? Heme is acting as a co-repressor. It will bind to the aporepressor molecule to form holorepressor, and this holorepressor will bind to the operator locus. So RNAP can't move forward to synthesize the enzymes needed for heme. Understand? So if heme is not there in the media, so there won't be any co-repressor molecules, and this, so the repressor molecule can't bind to the operator locus. Only the holorepressor will bind to the operator locus. Only the holorepressor will bind to the operator locus. So it can't bind to the operator locus. So RNAP will move forward and help in the synthesis of the enzymes needed for heme synthesis. Understand? If it is an 8-mark question, you can include, if a regulation of gene expression is being asked, you can include both operon concept, lac operon, as well as how heme synthesis is being regulated by repression, de-repression mechanism. Understand? So that is about regulation of gene expression in prokaryote. A word about regulation of gene expression in eukaryotes. Regulation of gene expression in eukaryotes. In eukaryotes, they are mainly being regulated at the transcription level. In eukaryotes, the regulation of gene expression is mainly carried out at the level of transcription. Understand? It is at the level of transcription. That is by regulating the physical availability of the definite region of chromatin for transcription. Physical availability of the regions of chromatin for transcription. This involves acetylation and phosphorylation of histone. It involves how? That is why acetylation as well as phosphorylation of histone. How? What happens is that when histone, you know, it's a basic protein. Histones are having positive charges. So what happens on acetylation of histone? The positive charge is decreased. The positive charge is decreased. There will be decrease in the positive charge on acetylation of histone. The histones are rich in lysine residues. So what happens on acetylation? The positive charges are decreased. So binding of histone to DNA is decreased. So binding of histone, DNAs are having negative charge and histones are having positive charge. So this histones can bind to DNA. But when it is being acetylated, histones can't bind to DNA, leading to physical accessibility of DNA for transcription. So there are more areas of DNA for transcription. And histone deacetylation has the opposite effect. Understand? Histone acetylation will cause removal of the repression mechanism, whereas deacetylation has an opposite effect. It causes repression. Is it clear? So histone acetylation will decrease the binding of histone to DNA. Acetylation of histone will decrease the binding of histone to DNA, leading to physical accessibility of DNA. There will be more area for DNA. The DNA sequences are open for transcription. But when histone is deacetylated, it has the opposite effect. Understand? So histone acetylation and deacetylation is one mechanism. Another mechanism is methylation and demethylation of deoxycytidine residues. Methylation and demethylation of deoxycytidine residues. Methylation and demethylation of deoxycytidine residues. Deoxycytidine residues. So what happens when deoxycytidine residues are methylated? See, methylation of deoxycytidine residue result in condensation of chromatin. Understand? Methylation of deoxycytidine residue result in condensation of chromatin. Condensation of chromatin. There will be condensation of chromatin. Understand? Condensation of chromatin. So DNA is not available for transcription. DNA is not available for transcription as a result of chromatin condensation. Understand? And demethylation has a opposite effect. Demethylation of deoxycytidine helps in easy transcription of DNA. Understand? So histone acetylation, deacetylation, methylation, demethylation of deoxycytidine residues, and gene amplification. Another mechanism is by gene amplification. What do you mean by gene amplification? Simply, it refers to repeated rounds of replication of DNA. Repeated rounds of replication of DNA resulting in production of multiple copies of gene. Resulting in production of multiple copies of gene, which result in increased level of protein synthesis. Understand? So, in simple terms, gene amplification refers to repeated rounds of replication of DNA resulting in production of multiple copies of gene, which result in increased level of synthesis of proteins. And this gene amplification is mainly involved in the development of tumors. Gene amplification is mainly involved in the development of tumors and as well as in drug resistance. Mainly involved in the development of tumors and drug resistance. Another mechanism of regulation in eukaryote is by gene rearrangement. Gene rearrangement. Another mechanism, acetylation, phosphorylation of histone, methylation, demethylation of deoxycytidine residue. We discussed gene amplification, and another mechanism is by gene rearrangement. Gene rearrangement. See, a segment of DNA can move from one location to another in the genome. A segment of DNA can move from one location to another. This forms a new recombination of gene so that different proteins are being synthesized. For example, in the production of heavy chain of immunoglobulin. Heavy chain of immunoglobulin is by gene rearrangement. Synthesis of the heavy chain of immunoglobulin is by gene rearrangement. The heavy chain consists of, you all know, it consists of a variable region and a constant region. And the gene encoding, these two regions are situated far apart. By gene recombination, they move together. Understand? By gene recombination, they move together and help in the synthesis of the heavy chain. Understand? The gene involved in the synthesis of variable region and constant region are situated far apart. As a result of gene recombination, they come together and help in the synthesis of heavy chain. That is gene recombination. So these are the different regulatory mechanisms that are seen in eukaryotes in transcription process. Now, regulation at post-transcription level is also a means of regulation of gene expression. That is RNA editing. We have discussed RNA editing. Then regulation by nuclease RNAs. Regulation by nuclease RNAs. Several nuclease RNAs can degrade the primary mRNA. Nuclease RNAs can degrade the primary transcript of mRNA before it emerges for translation. And this prevents appropriate expression of gene. Understand? So this nuclease RNAs can degrade the mRNA before it reaches the cytoplasm. And thus it can regulate gene expression. Understand? Another one is mRNA stability. An average eukaryotic mRNA molecule has a lifetime of only 3 hours. An average eukaryotic mRNA has got a lifetime of 3 hours. And the survival time of mature RNA in cytoplasm is regulated by the activity of nuclease RNA. Understand? It is the nuclease RNAs which regulate the lifetime of mRNA, thus regulating gene expression. Another mechanism is by tissue splicing, tissue-specific splicing. In some primary transcript sequence that are in some tissues, the introns in some primary transcript sequence that are treated as introns by some cells, and they are treated as exons by some other tissues. In some tissues, it is being treated as intron. In some tissues, the same sequence are being treated as exons. So what happens? Different proteins are being synthesized. Understand? In some tissues, it is being treated as exon, and some other, the same gene. In some tissues, it is being treated as exons, and in some other tissues, it is being treated as introns. And this results in the synthesis of different genes. And this is also a mechanism of gene regulation. Understand? These are the different mechanisms of gene regulation in eukaryotes. So which are the different mechanisms of regulation in eukaryotes? Yes, they are acetylation and deacetylation of histones, methylation, demethylation of deoxycytidine residues, then gene amplification, gene rearrangement, then tissue-specific splicing, mRNA stability, then regulation by nuclease RNAs are the different mechanisms that are seen in eukaryotes. I think the prokaryotic regulation is important. The other thing, just for completion's sake, I have discussed. Okay. So that is about regulation of gene expression. So next class, we will deal with the mutation. I think by that, we can finish our classes on genetics. I think by third week, we will finish our biochemistry topics. Last week, I thought of having a revision classes. What's your opinion? Through online, we can have a revision. Offline, revision. I have to ask the administrators how we can conduct an offline class. Then only the revision will be fruitful to you. Yes, what's your opinion? Class
ഉണ്ട് മാം.
ഉണ്ട്. റിവിഷൻ വേണോ? റിവിഷൻ തുടങ്ങാം നമുക്ക്. ഏതൊക്കെ ടോപ്പിക്സ് ആണ് നിങ്ങൾക്ക് വേണ്ടത്? സീക്വൻസിൽ ഒന്ന് പറയാമോ? അങ്ങനെ ഒന്ന് സീക്വൻസിൽ ഒന്ന് കൊണ്ടുവരുവാണെങ്കിൽ നമുക്ക് അങ്ങനെ സീക്വൻസിൽ തുടങ്ങായിരുന്നു റിവിഷൻ ക്ലാസ്സസ്. അപ്പം ക്ലാസ്മേറ്റ്സുമായിട്ട് ഡിസ്കസ് ചെയ്തിട്ട് ഏതൊക്കെ ടോപ്പിക്സ് ആണ് റിവിഷന് വേണ്ടത്, അതെങ്ങനെ നടത്താം എന്ന് നിങ്ങളും കൂടെ ഒന്ന് ചിന്തിച്ചിട്ട് പറയുമോ?
ഓക്കെ മാം.
കേട്ടോ? I think that finishes my class today. Tomorrow, I think the biochemistry class is from 10 to 11. കേട്ടോ 10 to 11 നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ഫിസിയോളജി എക്സാം ഉണ്ട് അതുകൊണ്ട് ബയോകെമിസ്ട്രി ക്ലാസ് 10 to 11 ഐ തിങ്ക് ഞാൻ അറിയിച്ചത് 11 to 12 എന്നാണ് 10 to 11 കേട്ടോ താങ്ക് യു ഓൾ താങ്ക് യു ഡിയർ സ്റ്റുഡൻസ്
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you.